Hey everybody, welcome to Bacon and Coffee. We're back. Took off August. It's a good thing too. You'll get into a little bit of the reason why. It wasn't a planned thing, but hey, we're back. It's September. Let's rock and roll. I'm going to start with the 30-second countdown. Here we go. And you know what? I've missed this jingle. I'm looking forward to it. I've been waiting all week to play it. So here we go, peeps. Friend Mark S.A. Smith, you were dancing in the background. People couldn't see it, you know?
Yeah, I missed that opening jingle, my friend. I missed our conversation last month, you know?
Yeah, me too.
The month before, I was talking to you from the parking lot of the Rusted Spoon in Utah.
And the good news
is... I heard that.
Yeah, and you were about to eat breakfast when you realized that we had a time difference problem, so your brother-in-law or your cousin or somebody ate your
brother.
My brother.
My brother ate my breakfast for me.
And then you went back and had another one.
And that's exactly right. He ordered me a breakfast so that when I walked in, my breakfast was warm. Now, that's what awesome. You call a true loving brother.
Absolutely. Somebody that would eat your meal and get you another one. That is awesome.
And then, exactly. And then right after that, we went to a farm stand where we enjoyed fresh-picked nectarines. Best I have ever eaten in my life. Fresh-picked cherries. Best I've ever eaten. You know, they were picked that same morning. So there's a real delight to that adventure. Mm-hmm. And today I'm in Las Vegas.
Well, isn't that home for you? I mean,
it's my domicile. It's where I get my mail.
Right.
And last night I saw Billy Strings. Are you familiar with Billy Strings?
No, I'm not.
All right, dude, you got.
I'm familiar with Silly Strings.
Yeah, indeed. Billy Strings. Look him up on YouTube. He will blow your mind.
Okay.
He's a 27-year-old bluegrass guitar player with one of the best killer bands. And he makes bluegrass fun and interesting.
Huh. Well, I definitely have to check him out, man. I love learning about new musicians. That's my
indeed
dig, baby.
A 2.5-hour concert in Vegas. Most Vegas shows are 75 minutes. So I'm all primed, ready to talk sales today after hearing Billy Strings sell himself last night.
That's awesome. Well, anyway, so you've been all over the place. I mean, you've been in Florida, you've been in Louisiana. Good thing you're in Louisiana or Florida right now, or New York.
I go where the weather suits my clothes.
Exactly. Well, that's nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So anyways, when I booted up today, I mean, it was, I knock on wood because last week, it was Wednesday night. I was sitting down watching TV with my wife and my dog, and I felt this sizzle over my shoulder. It was raining.
It was bacon.
I thought it was bacon. It didn't smell like bacon, though. It definitely didn't have that smell. It smelled more like, oh boy, burnt hair. And then I looked over at the right, and my front door lit up like the gates of heaven. I mean, it was accompanied by a loud boom. And so lightning struck the front of the house and took out, first and foremost, it came up through the cable modem and fried the cable modem. And then anything that was connected to the cable modem with an Ethernet cord was fried.
And you like hard wires, essentially everything.
I do, yeah. Because, I mean, it's how I can network everything. And so, yeah, it fried USB hubs, Ethernet hubs, printers, backup hard drive systems, all that kind of fun stuff. Luckily, all the hard drives were fine, and I was able to just buy new gear, plug the hard drives in, back to normal. But it's been 2 weeks of major disruption. The reason I brought that up because you have a show called The Disruption Show.
Yeah, Selling Disruption Show. That's right.
Right. So Amazon was selling me disruption all week long.
The good news is they can get it to you fast. So.
And they've been really good. I mean, and it's a challenge though, man, when you have to go piece by piece to see what's working, what's not. It's not like you're starting from scratch. So
right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're back up and you got a whole
Yeah.
fresh round of gear, and hopefully your homeowner's insurance picked up a part of the tab.
Yeah, well, I had the good news about it is I had a homeowners and a business policy. Even though I worked from home, I had a business policy that covered lost time and the business gear because
Good.
that would be, that's so that was just a kind of a cautionary tale for everybody. If you're
Yeah.
working from home, it's not expensive insurance, man. It's only like $1,000 a year, but it covers lost time and gear up to $25,000. So that's that more than covered everything. It wasn't terrible. It was maybe about $2,000 in lost gear,
Well,
but
if you take
still,
a look at that's actually a pretty reasonable bet. Given the
yeah.
fact that $1,000 to get 25,000 of coverage,
Hmm.
and you and I both have been in business for decades, and
Hmm.
both of us have had a number of business interruptions.
Right.
It's inevitable.
Right. And,
So
I mean, but there's been a big business interruption, and that is, the economy, supply chain, all those kind of things that have happened over the last, year and a half plus. And so we're in the middle of, a lot of challenges for business, some disruption, some changes.
yeah,
And, it's getting harder and harder to get people's attention. And it's harder and harder to convince them, that you have something that they need and something that they want. So let's talk about how can we um, get to the point where we get in front of people and start selling the way we should be. So what are your thoughts?
I got lots of them.
I'm sure
Now,
you
right
do.
right now we are in the middle of an extraordinary situation in the world, and that is that we are facing a number of events, any one of which would cause interesting challenges. We're in the middle of a war. COVID absolutely is a bioweapon, and it's an attack. And we're coming out of the Afghan war, which is a mess. And then we've got inflation right now. Rents in Las Vegas have gone up 30% over the past 90 days.
Wow.
And yeah, wow is right, according to Zillow. And then, of course, we just got the numbers out. The unemployment numbers are the employment numbers were a lot lower than they were expected by a substantial quantity. And so there's a lot of challenges going on. And of course, any one of these would be an issue.
Hmm.
We've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of need. If you aren't familiar with Maslow's, it's an amazing psychological model that explains why people behave the way that they do.
Hmm.
And so for a lot of people, they're operating at the lower two levels of Maslow, where essentially you can only pay attention to one thing at a time.
Hmm.
And that is to take care of yourself, take care of your personal security, take care of your family security before you can move up to higher levels where you can make more intelligent decisions.
Yep.
You move out from reaction to proaction as you move up the ladder. So one of the
Well,
challenges that we
and
face, yes,
let me interrupt. Let me interrupt one sec, because one of the things that I had to deal with this last week is supply chain issues. On top of everything else, it's like
yes,
there's certain gear I could not replace because it was obsolete, and other stuff it's like we cannot get parts to
yes,
make these things. So you have to punt, and you have to kind of reinvent and try to think things through a little bit differently. So I think that's a big disruption too. I mean, that's a
massive.
yeah, and it's not necessarily a war, but it's I mean, cars, they can't get chips for cars,
Right.
and so even selling and buying a used car, you're going to get a lot more if you sell, but you're also going to pay a lot more if you need to buy. Same
Well,
thing with homing,
I indeed.
houses and stuff.
And Brian, I had that same experience this week. I
Hmm.
took that 2019 RAV4 that I bought 18 months ago as I was heading out. I put
Hmm.
40,000 miles on it, and I sold it for the same price that I paid for it
Wow,
18 months ago.
that's a good deal.
It was a good deal for me. It let me buy a truck
Hmm.
with no money down because there was enough equity in the used car to be the down payment for the truck. So
Nice.
but yes, right now, my clients who operate in the world of IT, they're looking at 16-week delivery for things like laptops and body cameras. And we're going to talk about that in context. One of our power tools right now when it comes to selling is scarcity. And we truly do have scarcity when it comes to certain items in the world today. And we can legitimately use scarcity as a way to create urgency in the mind of a customer. So one of the things I want to share with you today is we're talking about sales. is what are the reasons why somebody won't buy from you if they
Mm-hmm.
need what you are selling?
Mm-hmm.
And there's only two reasons why somebody won't buy from you. Number one is priority. In other words, they need to spend their money other places right now, or they need to spend their time other ways right now, or perceived risk. It may be a priority, but they see you as risky for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you can manage the priority issue and then move to the perceived risk issue, then you can close the deal as fast as humanly possible. And once you're aware of those are the two reasons what hold people back, then you can proceed if you know how to manage these. And I think that's what we should talk about for this hour.
No, absolutely. I love it. And I mean the two things that you're talking about is that perceived risk is it's one of those kind of things that it either is real or it's something that you've made up in your own head, because
Well,
you feel
that's why it's called perceived risk.
right. Exactly. Yeah. And so, I think that it's kind of overcoming your own story in your head. And I mean,
Yes.
when you're talking about, the need that people have right now, it's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people don't even realize what those needs are. Right. So, and just so you know, I don't know if you can see the chat or not on your machine, but Mike Verrett, who's been a guest on the show, he asked a question. I'm going to pop on my glasses and read
All
it.
right.
He said, Mark, you and I are aligned on the social conditions front, freaking tsunami, tornado, hurricane, and all, all in the same weekend. And he says, the reason that the toy business did not suffer after the Great Depression's parents spent the resources on giving their children a more positive, normal experience.
Yes.
It gave us the marbles as a game,
Yes.
So it's
brilliant insight, and thank you for calling that out. And and we are struggling through that.
right.
And so
Yeah. So anyways, we'll start off with your first point, and let's kind of dig deep into that. So
sure. Well, let's actually. I want to pop up a level.
okay.
Dear old Zig Ziglar, who
I love Zig.
Absolutely inspired many a sales professional to do their very best, said there's 5 reasons why somebody won't do business with you. No need, no hurry, no money, no want, no trust.
Right.
And out of those 5, there's only one we have control over, and that is trust. Do they trust us? And that's where the perceived risk comes into play. The prior 4 are a matter of priority. No need is a priority. No hurry is a priority. No money is a priority. We have money to spend on the things that we are interested in. We'll find the funds. If it's important to us, we'll find the funds. No want is a priority. So those are all either desire or priority elements. And then the last one is a trust element or perceived risk element. So that's really the fundamental basis that we're working upon. And so priority is, let me just, again, let's pop up a level.
Yeah, go ahead.
There are 3 fundamental components to a person's motivation to purchase. And the first one is objective. What is it you want to achieve? What is it that you want to avoid? And everybody has a specific outcome they want to achieve, and they want to enjoy the benefits of that outcome. And there's something that they want to avoid, and they want to enjoy the benefits of avoiding that particular outcome. So that's fundamentally the reason why people purchase everything. And if you can, as a sales professional, make sure that you dial into their personal motivation. What is their outcome and what is the benefits of that outcome to them? And then once you understand that, you can align with their objectives so that they are now speaking your language and you're speaking their language.
Right.
And the old model was to attempt to force to motivate them. And it's way better when you find out what motivates them and align with that. Then you're riding the horse in the direction that it's heading.
Right.
And then the next layer of what motivates a person is priorities. That's the order in which they will achieve their objectives. We can't achieve everything all at the same time. We don't have all the money we need to purchase everything we want right now, which is probably a really good thing. Otherwise, I'd be surrounded by all this stuff.
Hey, don't pick on me, man. I got boxes everywhere,
I'm not picking on you. It's just how it works, my friend. It's
I
just
understand. Yes. Well, and Amazon makes it so easy too.
Oh,
I mean, it's
painless. I've had Amazon delivers every week this week because I've got an address, and so I've got getting all my stuff.
Right.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So the priority is the order in which people are going to buy things and going to approach this. So if they need you, their objectives, and your offering line up, then the next step is priorities. Is this something that's important to them? And then the third portion of their motivation is criteria. How will they choose who to go with to accomplish this objective and fulfill their priorities? And so let's talk about priority for a few moments. One of the best ways to identify a person's priority is to ask them some questions. And I want to share with you a very, very simple sales process that I created for my clients because it's dead simple and they can very easily remember 4 things. And as long as they do those 4 things, they'll be successful.
Okay, fire away.
And the acronym is RACE. So race to the finish line is the metaphor. And R stands for relevance. We start off by identifying what is relevant to our prospect. What is it they're trying to achieve? What are their objectives? And so by focusing in on their relevance, then we will be interesting to them. Right? Because if we can help them with that, so what you want to do is clearly identify their objectives. What do they want to achieve and avoid? So here's some questions. I wrote down some questions for you. So what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to avoid? What are your highest aspirations? What are your biggest concerns? And those items are going to come out within the context of your conversation. And so once we understand the relevance and the context for their objectives,
and objections,
indeed, then the next thing we can go to is the A, which is authority. The R is relevance and context, and A is authority, which is you have to illustrate your ability to deliver on those requirements. Now, the best possible thing to do at this phase of the game is discuss how you bring expertise and authority. So why are you the one that they should pay attention to make this work? So to do this, what you want to tell success stories, a problem, solution, and outcome. So essentially you illustrate, I've done this before for other people, but you leave out the tactical details. It's too soon right now to dig into the details, the product uses, the services delivered, prices, and things like that. It's too soon. So, you've got alignment with their objectives. Then you illustrate that you indeed have the capacity to deliver the outcome that they're looking for, but you're not yet telling them how. It's too soon.
Right.
Then you move to the C, which is commitment, which is mapping your commitment to their commitment. This is a piece that most salespeople forget. Your customer is committed to a specific outcome, either to themselves or to a spouse or to a boss or to a customer. There is some commitment there. And once you've identified that commitment and saying, I commit to helping you achieve that, then you've created the trust, the beginnings of the trust for them to say, well, geez, if you're as committed as I am, why don't we do this? And a lot of people forget that particular step. So there's some interesting way of figuring out their commitments. And the commitments are actually in line with priority. Commitments and priority are synonymous.
Sure.
So the way that you identify them is ask them, who have you made commitments to? In fact, let me see here. I think I've even got some questions for you. What personal commitments have you made to accomplish this? Who has made promises based on accomplishing this? So whose job is on the line if they don't fulfill it? Who is responsible for the success of this? So whose career advancement and relationship is on the line if they don't make it? Who is staking their career and relationship on this? So who has the biggest motivation to provide positive support to this outcome? What resources have you allocated to this? Because any resource they've allocated means they've made commitments and they've taken steps down the path.
Right. It's in the budget.
It is in the budget, yeah. Who has been assigned to be part of the team, and what are their roles and responsibilities? So the more the members, the higher the priority. One member, lower priority. 5 members, 5 times the priority.
Right.
And what have you already accomplished so far? So where are they in their mindset? So this is one of the ways that some of the questions that we can ask to identify their commitments. Yeah.
So now we get to the E.
We're still on the C. I want to talk about the commitment component just a little further.
Sure, no problem. Go for it.
Yeah, so there's essentially 4 things we can use to identify their commitment. The first one is, what commitments have already they made? Where are they going? The second one is, who are their scorekeepers? The scorekeeper is the person who is going to judge the success based on what they're doing, what they're buying, what they're acquiring.
Right. So that would be the C-level people, accounting, that kind of stuff.
Well, it's their boss or the shared relationships and objectives with perhaps a spouse.
Sure. Okay.
So you can ask some questions to identify the scorekeeper. The scorekeeper is the person who's going to hold this person's feet to the fire. And unless what you're selling is a single person deciding, which is not the case in business, there's always multiple people that are involved in the decision. Then we have to figure out who is the scorekeeper and how are they impacting this decision. So some of the questions you can ask: who's driving this outcome? Who decides how to measure the success of this project? Who wants this to succeed? Who wants things to remain the same? So that's a potential resistance.
Sure.
Who wants things to change? Who decides what needs to be done? Who decides how to pay for this? Who determines what's an acceptable ROI? And how do they determine that ROI? Who ultimately is responsible for the success of this project? If there's a problem, who's most likely to get upset? Whose job depends on this? How did you make the decision last time? Now, you're not going to ask all these questions, but what I wanted to do is illustrate that there are questions you can ask to identify what's going on with the scorekeeper. And of course, you have to make sure the scorekeeper's criteria is met for your person to buy.
Very true. And that's, because it is a lot of questions, but I get where you're coming from. You use the right question at the right time. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I want to give you an opportunity to finish up. So is that it on commitment, or we got more? Or I just want to know what the heck the E is. That's really what I want.
We're gonna get to the E, and you're gonna like that part. All right.
Okay.
E. All right. So
I'm very excited.
I like it. So far we've covered 2 of the 4 elements to identify a person's commitment. The third one is budget, right? If they have a budget, there's a commitment.
Right.
That means that they're going to spend some money. So here's some questions that you can ask to identify if there's a budget. How did you determine the budget? What does it include? What do you think it might leave out? What other departments and people might contribute to the budget? Under what circumstances could that budget increase? What is the budget deployment timing? Who must approve of this purchase? What's it cost if things remain as they are? What's it worth for you to proceed? Now, those last 2 questions are interesting because it creates a defensible budget. What's it cost for things to remain as they are is the least they should be willing to spend to advance. And what's it worth for you to proceed is the most they should be willing to spend to advance. So between those two questions, you can create a defensible budgetary range. And as long as you deliver their outcome within this number, they can justify it.
Right. Yeah, totally makes sense.
So that's the budget element. And then the 4th element is deadlines. So a deadline is the best indication of commitment because they have committed to somebody else to achieve something within a certain time frame. And if they don't, well, there's repercussions. And fundamentally, no deadline, no deal.
Right.
It's just the way it works. No deadline, no deal. You got to have a deadline. And there's 2 types of deadlines. There's an internal deadline, which is one that they have committed to somebody else, and that's always the best deadline to sell against. Or an external deadline, that's one we put on them. If you buy before the end of the month, I'll knock off 10%. Now, usually, if we provide them with an internal deadline, we have to give up margin. And the only exception to that rule is scarcity. And for example, right now with the supply chain issues, the answer is, look, if you need this, it's on 8-week delivery. And if you wait a week, you're going to be at the end of the line. And if you can make a commitment now, you're going to be at the very best position in the line. And you know what? If you decide 8 weeks from now not to go forward, I have somebody who would love to buy that from me.
Yeah, see, that's great. Yep.
Right. And so that is a legitimate deadline that you can use without losing margin. So scarcity is a genuine way of creating an external deadline that works. And this actually works brilliantly. I remember when I was a young whippersnapper, probably 26 years old, working for Hewlett Packard and selling high-end oscilloscopes for testing equipment. And I was out with a fellow sales professional who had more experience than I did. And we had just completed a perfect demonstration. And he said, Martin said, so does this fulfill your requirement? The customer says, absolutely, this is perfect. He says, when does this project start? He says, 3 months, about 3 months is when we're going to start this project. He says, oh, well, I need to get an order from you this week because we're on 12-week delivery.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, okay. I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to see any action for 3 months.
Yep.
And it was it was genuinely a 12-week delivery. You never want to falsify that, because if they find out from somebody else you've told them a lie, you blew the trust component.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And I've done a few interviews on trust recently on the podcast, on the Bacon podcast, and it's about trust, it's about change management, those kind of things.
Expectation management.
Exactly. And I'm spending the entire month of September trying to work on sales related topics. So I'm so excited you're kicking it off with this.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to kick it off with you.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we kick things off for sales? We always kick things off.
Well,
a football metaphor.
Yes, well, it is, and it is football season. NFL starts this week. Woo! It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Are you gonna be rooting for your Las Vegas Raiders?
You know what, Brian? I am not a sports fan.
You're not?
No, I've never been a sports fan. It's not been part of my family heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And those friends of mine who are sports fans are in one of two states. They're elated because their team won, or they're depressed because their team lost.
Right.
And personally, I don't want to have some overpaid guy decide how I feel.
Yeah.
So I'd rather grab my guitar, because I always feel better after the end of 3 hours with my guitar. And at the end of 3 hours of ball game, all I am is drunk and pissed. So.
Yeah, well, see, and the bottom line is I've grown up in New York and Chicago, and
those are sports towns.
Those are sports towns, but they always lose. So our expectations are really low. I mean, when the Cubs won the World Series, it's like, okay, is this the end of the world as we know it? I mean, is Armageddon coming? What's happening? It's like,
it was. You know, all these people that kept supporting a losing team felt finally justified.
Exactly.
Well, if you're a rational human being, you're going to switch teams. You're going to root for the team that is winning. But no, that's not how sports works.
But see, in Chicago, we can do that. You could root for the Cubs or the Sox. The Sox are winning this year, so I'm a Sox fan. So that's the way it works. Yeah, I know all my Cubs fans out there going, boo, hiss.
It's just the most amazing identity element.
It is fun, yes. It is a lot of fun.
Well, it's how we still essentially can fulfill the hunter roles as men. Is we can go out there and we can root for our teams, and sometimes we'll kill one and sometimes we won't.
That's right.
So there's that deep historical, psychological component.
And to that I say, Gunga, Unga, Gadunga.
Hakuna Matata.
Yeah, something along that lines. All right,
which I actually learned, Hakuna Matata actually means, what have we forgotten to license?
Seriously? It could be, I mean, just because Disney does, makes some kind of animals sing it a certain way doesn't necessarily mean it means what they say, but it could. Who knows? Yeah, what have we forgotten the license?
Everything's licensed, so.
Well, it is, yes, by all means. So anyways, all right, can I get my E now?
Yes, you can get your E.
I want my E, but before you go to E, I want to say something, okay? Okay. I don't have anything for the R, relevance, but I do have something for authority, because it made me think of the Authority song by John Cougar, and now known as John Mellencamp, or John Cougar Mellencamp. And then Commitment is one of my favorite movies, The Commitments, which is about a Irish rock band.
Yes.
Yes. And I interviewed a guy from Ireland. He's going to be on the podcast next week. His name is Aidan McClellan, I think it is. I have to double check, but Aidan, he worked in a pub up there, and it just brought back all these, visuals of the movie Commitment. So how do you put E into music? What is your E?
Oh, let me see here. Well, we've got the Eagles. Easy feeling.
Yes. Easy. Yep.
Easy. Easy, peaceful, easy feeling. Let's see here.
So what is the E?
Everything she does. Oh, sorry. Are you looking for the E?
I'm looking for the E.
It is execute.
Execute. Ooh.
Execute. What is the next logical step?
Okay, that makes me think of execute. Makes me think of Black Sabbath and Ozzy and executing birds on stage. So, but anyways, we're off on a tangent. So let's go down the execute. Different kind of execute, not the kind that involves the harm of animals. We're talking about.
Ozzy and Alice Cooper both played those theatrical games.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that's
Alice
exactly.
Cooper's a great golfer, by the way, but that's another story.
Well, Alice learned how to turn his expertise into cash and
Yep.
managed to keep his mind.
Yeah,
So
and
yes, execution.
all Ozzy could do was go, Sharon! Sharon! All right, go on. I digress.
It's okay. This is bacon and coffee on a Saturday morning, and
It is.
you and I grew up watching cartoons on Saturday morning, and now we are the cartoon on Saturday morning.
Hey, we're adult cartoons. It's okay. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, execute. So jointly plan the next step.
Mm-hmm.
So there's relevance. I have authority. I'm aligned with your commitment. What's the natural next step? And it could be anything. It could be a product review against their mission requirements. It could be a phased project deployment plan. So you have a proof of concept, maybe a pilot, maybe initial rollout. You could have an internal review process conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a configuration and pricing conversation. It could be a credit application. It doesn't really matter what the next step is. Just identify what it is and take it. Mm-hmm. Because that's the ultimate step to getting where you want to be. And a lot of people have to step into their purchase so that they go through their risk reduction process as you go through the execution. So just to summarize this, the race is relevance. Illustrate relevance to your client by understanding their objectives so that you can speak with relevance. Authority, tell them quick stories about why you can help them achieve their objectives without going into specific details. Mm-hmm. Next is C, understand their commitments and then align with those commitments. I commit to helping you achieve this. And then what is the next logical execution step? This is very easy, very seamless, and aligns with the psychology of the buyer, makes your life a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's priority. That's priority. All of that's priority.
So one of the books that I've been listening to was on, it was actually Dale Carnegie and a couple of his different books. And one of the things he talks about is the yes and theory. It's yes but versus yes and. I mean, no gives people a negative feeling. Yes gives people a positive feeling. Yes and gives them even more of a positive feeling. I mean, it's the basis behind theater.
Improv.
It's improv. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And yes, but is kind of like it's a yes with an objection built into it. So the key question is through that process, how do we get people to do that yes and?
Well, we don't, but we do. We don't make them do that, but we do that. And
right.
Yes, but and yes, and is one of the most powerful phrases that you can use as a sales professional to keep things going. The word but, a lot of people say don't use the word but. No. But is a power word. Mm-hmm. And when you say the word but, anything that precedes that is diminished or negated.
Right.
So if you want to restate something that they have said, and you follow it with but, it psychologically moves down what they just said. If you say and, it anchors it and then brings something on top of it. So here's the way to play, is that if you make a statement and they object, say yes, but, and then proceed with your new direction.
Right.
If they agree with your statement, say yes, and proceed in your direction. And this simple linguistic choice is going to speed you to resolution faster than almost anything else you can do linguistically.
Absolutely. Yep. And so going back to your oscilloscope, so you come in, you do the demo, you do that stuff, and the guy says, okay, well, I want to, I love these, but I need to have them in 2 weeks. And you turn around and say, yes, but delivery time because of supply chain is going to be 12 weeks.
Yes.
So yes. And if you order today, we can guarantee you in the list. And if for some reason you can find them somewhere else, you can always sell them to somebody. So you're basically using that as a combo.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a poo-poo platter.
It is a poo-poo platter. What do you want to snack on next?
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, you always have this, yes, or you could say yes and. I cannot get you a new one in 2 weeks. But that said, I do have a rental company that can bring you one that you can rent for 2.5 months until you get your own. Would that be acceptable?
See, that's awesome. Yeah.
Right. So that, as a sales professional, you're always looking to, in some way, get the customer's objective met, because then you become relevant and you become a person of interest, and they know that you will always help them solve their problem, even though it might be unconventional.
Right. Well, and that's so, yeah. I mean, if you could do yes and,
Mm-hmm.
it's always better than yes but, is
And
basically,
always,
yeah.
always.
Which are,
Yeah. And another thing that we did in that situation is, we can get you a demo unit for 2 weeks, and that'll give you enough time to line up a rental. And meanwhile, let's take the order. Let's get your order process started. I'll get you a demo into your hands, and then we'll line up the rental, and that way you're completely covered until you get it. How's that sound? Perfect.
yeah, it sounds awesome. You get to play with it for a while, and then you get to rent one after you've played with it, and then you get to actually keep it and utilize it and save the money.
There it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, how do we deal with perceived risk? We've gone through the race. We've won the race.
Well, that's right. We win the race, one step at a time.
Right. Exactly.
That's right. Well, remember, it's the old adage, crawl, walk, run, win the race.
Right.
So, yeah, perceived risk. We could take everything that we do and we could put it on a continuum from high perceived risk to low perceived risk. And perceived risk is really based on a person's experience in what you sell, either from you or from another party. And if they've bought from you before and you've always delivered, you've been able to take care of any issues that arise, then it's a low perceived risk situation. If they've never bought from you before, it's higher perceived risk. They don't know if you're going to deliver or not. They don't know if you're going to back them up with customer service or not. If they've never purchased what you've bought before, and they don't have the education to know how to make the decision, that becomes a very high perceived risk, because they don't want to make a bad mistake.
Right.
And part of the reason why is that every purchase has a career or relationship impact. Every purchase has a career or relationship impact.
Right.
And so if you do well, it supports that, because your significant other or your scorekeeper thinks that you are making good judgments. And that consistent good judgment in the world of business gets you promoted, and the consistent good judgment in relationships keeps you married.
Yes, which is a good point.
So in both cases, there's always multiple people involved, unless you're just solo and you're doing your own thing. You really don't care what anybody else says or does. But that's not the case for 95% of the world. So your job is to identify their perceived risk and to identify what they're concerned about. Now, most sales trainers will say, are you out of your freaking mind? You have the customer thinking about what they're afraid of? Well, yeah, because we have to resolve that anyway,
right,
before they can proceed. So let's do that proactively, and let's take the credit for educating them, so they see us as somebody who is relevant and informed and interested in helping them achieve the best possible outcome. So when it comes to reducing that perceived risk, we have to be proactive about it. Otherwise, anything that they consider as a risk that's unaddressed becomes an objection. All objections are unaddressed perceived risks. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all they are. So let's do this proactively instead. Now, the interesting thing about risk is the corporate word for fear.
Yeah. Right. Very
Right?
true.
We can't say I'm afraid in the corporate world, but I can say I perceive risk here. They're one and the same.
Yeah.
And, fear is the anticipation of an undesired outcome. So that's an important concept to keep in mind. Expectation of an undesired outcome. So we have to identify what those undesired outcomes are that they're expecting, and then make sure that they see ways to make those unexpected outcomes never happen.
Yep.
That is the fundamental to reducing perceived risk.
Or at the same time, it's to minimize the impact of it and give them, escape hatches or, different paths to get out of the building in case of disaster.
Exactly.
It's a perceived risk is if there's a fire, I can't take the elevator, so I have to walk down the stairs. But, one of the ways to simplify that is like, well, you don't have to go down the stairs. We've put in a slide for you. You know, it's like, so yes, you do have to exit and you do have to go down, but we're going to make it easier for you, right?
One of the places that I visited this season is Promontory Point in Utah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the location of the Golden Spike, where the railroad it was completed in
Mm-hmm.
1869, and very close to that is the rocket factory where all of the rockets are manufactured that sent the Challenger and. So that's probably not the best example, but
Yeah, no, that's not a good one. No, any of the space shuttles other than the Challenger.
indeed, all the solid rocket motors that go into missiles and into rockets and
Mm-hmm.
all those are built there.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an assembly building that has lots and lots of escape slides.
Mm-hmm.
That was my point. Is that yes, there in the place where these rockets are manufactured, there's an exit within, I don't know, 50 feet
Yep.
that people just open the door and jump in and they're out of the building.
And that's one way to mitigate perceived risk.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's one of the ways of doing it. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
we do like slides when we have to get away from things rapidly. I'll
Yes.
send you a picture that's actually quite fascinating.
I'd love to see it. Yes, that'd be
You know,
cool.
and by the way, they call that the Rocket Garden. So if you're north of Salt Lake City and you want to go see those, that's the Rocket Garden. Go check out the Golden Spike. It's very cool. They have 2 steam trains that they
Mm-hmm.
bring out during the season, and they run them. One runs on coal, one runs on wood. And then there's also a very interesting location called Spiral Jetty out into the north edge of Salt Lake City. All worth the time to go and explore.
Yeah, it's I've actually swam in Salt Lake. That's as much as I did. We stayed in a campground. I went to the Salt Lake, swam in it, but we didn't get a chance to explore a whole bunch. But I mean, that's very interesting that
Risk.
that area. Yeah. And what did you say just a second ago? You said something garden. You said rocket garden.
Rocket Garden. Yeah, if you want to go see, they have an outdoor display of the rockets that were built there, and you can go see the Rocket Garden and walk around outside
It's a
and
great
see.
name for a band. That's what I was thinking. Is
It
like,
would be a great name for a band. Yeah.
so that's why I was going back to the musical thing. But anyways, continue on down your perceived risk because we've
Indeed.
gone down tangents, slides, and rockets.
Yeah, we're a multivariant here, right? So perceived risk, great. So our job here is to figure out what those concerns are,
Mm-hmm.
and then to make them disappear. And so along the way, I'm going to share with you something we've talked about a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
8 ways of reducing those perceived risk, and we're going to go through this really rapidly. So grab a pencil, listener, and you can rock and roll. Or what you can also do, Brian, is point them to this podcast.
Yep. And I'll find the episode number as you're giving them. So go ahead, sir.
Great. So the first one, the first thing we have to do, the most powerful way, and is number one is proof. Is illustrate that you've done this before, and I discussed that in the RACE formula, where authority you tell stories about how you have achieved this objective for others, within the same context or at least a similar context. So testimonials, case studies, assessment tools, proof of context. But the thing you have to keep in mind is the proof has to be contextual to their business or to their scenario. So in business terms, you can't use a logistics example for a financial company. They just can't make the leap. Even though you can, they can't. So you have to come up with some story that will work for them, or some circumstance. You may leave out some of the context to illustrate that you can deliver on that problem, but you may have done it for a different situation. But that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's completely okay. So proof statements, you want all of the success stories that you can pull out, and you pull out the right ones, and they've got to be short. Ideally a proof story runs less than 60 seconds. Otherwise they become boring, and we don't want that to happen.
Right.
Then the next P is process.
Mm-hmm.
So an important component is to understand is that a manager will never agree to a project they don't know how to manage.
Right.
I'll say that again. It's so important. A manager will never agree to a project they don't know how to manage. So what we have to do is illustrate, here's how this is going to work. Here are the steps that you're going to go through, I'm going to go through to make sure that this works to your satisfaction. So this gives them checkpoints and milestones and how all of this is going to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And by giving them that stepwise approach, then they can manage it. They can see where they are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, they're working against a deadline. Everybody's working against a deadline. No deadline,
Right.
no deal. So we have to show them what are the steps that they can take, that I need to take, and the time allotted to each of those steps to get them to their objective by their deadline. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this concept of process is really helpful when customers are dragging their feet, because you can talk to them about each step in the process and assign a time frame to each of them. And you can illustrate that you probably need to make a choice within the next week or two if you're going to hit that deadline because of all these other things that
Right.
have to happen leading up to it.
Right. And I've run into that exact same thing on working with a client who had to get um, a catalog done for a trade show. And that whole timeline thing is okay. There is a drop dead date in order to get this to a printer, in order to get you printed catalogs at your office so you can take them down to the trade show. And there's a little bit of a variable in there. If you push it one step too far, they may not get delivered, because you can't guarantee that they can get the paper and those kind of things. So the sooner we can get it to the printer, confirm the paper, the better chance you have of getting this. So you have to kind of backstep it from there and say, by this date, we have to have it done. By this date, we have to write. This date, we need graphics, all those kind of things. And so something as simple as a catalog even has that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And you probably have observed that Murphy's Law says the tighter the deadlines, the more things are going to go wrong.
Exactly, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know how that happens, but it does.
Oh, it does. Yes, absolutely. Well, and also, the more lax that people get is like, we don't have to rush this. And then at the very, very end is when things are discovered, typos or, images that will not print properly. I mean, that stuff just happens when you're not, paying attention to the gory details. And that's just the way it is.
And then what ends up happening is that the Federal Express bill and the drayage to take it from the loading dock to your exhibit is going to be more than the print bill.
Exactly. Yep.
Versus if you just carried it in your briefcase, none of that expense would be. Anyway.
Yeah, but point taken.
Process.
But the bottom line is back to the P's.
Indeed. All right. The third P is progress. Progress. What you want to do is illustrate that every time that you have a conversation with this person, that they make progress towards making the decision. They know more. They're more informed. They have a clearer vision of what they want to have happen. They're feeling more comfortable with where they are in the process, and that illustration of progress is an important part of building the trust along the way. There's a couple of things you can do to help illustrate the progress. First, you have to call it out. And my suggestion is that you ask a couple of questions at the beginning of every conversation, which is, number one is, what would make this a valuable meeting for you when you have a conversation? And they'll tell you, well, what I'm trying to do is figure out this. Okay, so if I do that, what would it mean? Well, that moved me further down my path, and it would really help me out a lot. Wonderful. I just set the table. Well, what if they ask you to do something that you're not prepared to do? Well, when would you like to know that? At the beginning of the meeting or at the end of the meeting? I would rather know that at the beginning of the meeting, saying, I'm not prepared to have that conversation. Shall we reschedule when I am? Well, no. Let's just continue on and we can get to that point. Perfect. But at least their expectation has been reset. And we talked about that earlier in the show.
Right.
Is customer satisfaction is based on expectation management. So you have to start off with what would make this meeting valuable. And everybody in the meeting needs to answer that question so that you get to provide value to everybody who's part of that conversation. And then at the end of the meeting, you want to leave yourself at least 5 minutes so you can bring things to a conclusion, so you can close the meeting without hanging.
Right.
And the question that you ask in that particular case is, what was the most valuable thing from this meeting?
Right.
And if you have a group of people and you go around and everybody says something's valuable, you've just elevated the trust. You've reduced the perceived risk of that entire group of people because of you facilitating that. And it is one of the most important things you can do is to have your customer tell you what they found valuable in the meeting. And the reason why is because adults don't argue with their own data.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So if they're saying it, they believe it, and they have to stick by it too. They want to be right.
That's a commitment. They have just made a commitment in a positive sense to you.
Very true.
So those items, just those items right there, these three initial piece, proof, process, and progress, can get you well down the path for reducing perceived risk. But in the 10 minutes we have left, let's just go ahead and wrap up this list. I've got a few more for you.
Yeah, go ahead, zap through the rest of the P's.
Next one is position. So the idea here is to change how they are viewing you. And the idea is to align with what they have already committed to. That's the reason why we have to understand their commitments. You have to position your offering as something that is there absolutely to support their commitments. And if you can illustrate that through your positioning, that will get you there a whole lot faster. The next P is preference. If they've purchased something like this in the past, then it's going to be a little easier because they do have a preference. And here's a quick set of 6 questions that help you identify preference. So grab your pen and rock and roll. Number 1 is, what have you done in the past? No matter how they respond, say, okay, great, because they made that decision. It was the right decision for them when they made it. So don't tell them that, ooh, yikes, how'd that work out for you? No, that's insulting. Don't do that.
Right.
That blows away trust. No. That was the right decision at the time, so you have to figure out how they made that decision so you can align with that decision because that's already a commitment. So the next question is, okay, what do you like best about that? And what you're extracting here is their positive criteria on how they made that decision. And whatever they say, write it down, and then say what else, and write that down, and then say what else, and write that down, until they say that's it. And now you have a list of their positive criteria, the things you must deliver, otherwise they won't say yes. Now, after they've said all the positive things, then you can say, well, what do you like least? And they're psychologically ready to dump their bucket, but don't get this screwed up, because if you ask them what they like least without getting all the positive items out first, it'll psychologically destroy the process. Now, everybody has complaints. There is no such thing as perfection, with there are a few perfect things, but usually people have some complaints.
Right.
And of course, anything they complain about is an opportunity, because if you can deliver what they want and avoid what they don't want, you're further down the path. You make them happier. And again, you just say, what else, until they end up with that whole list of negative things. I don't like the color. I didn't like the customer service. I didn't like the attitude of the sales guys. Whatever it happens to be. Some of it's product, some of it's non-product, doesn't matter. These are all the things that you can deliver. All right, You're not done yet, though. You're not done. You're just halfway through. The next question you ask is, if you could have things any way you wanted, what would you change? Now, this is a magic wand because it allows you them to expand their criteria. Whereas what they have just shared with you is the things they like and the things they don't like based on their current experience. What you're asking for them to do next is, okay, make up your ideal dream situation. And from that, if you can cherry pick 2 or 3 things from what they're asking for a change, you have just jumped to the top of the list because you can provide something that they didn't have access to before.
Right.
And then we have to take that dream and we have to make it a reality. If I could do that, this is question number 5. If I could do that, what would it mean to you and your team? And so this turns these new criteria into value, whether it's monetary or time or experience, whatever it happens to be. Then the last question we ask is, what would cause you to change your mind? And of course, we've just walked them through a psychologically correct sequence to help them identify and support why they might change their mind. So this is how you can help identify preference. It was with these 6 questions. So you might go back and listen to this again, or go to my LinkedIn page. These 6 questions are listed in one of the articles that I've written. So you can go find it there too.
Awesome. And on top of that, if anybody wants to listen to the 8 Ps, it is episode number 459. You can go to Bacon Podcast and look for episode 459, search 8 Ps, or go to Mark S.A. Smith and look through the barrage of podcasts that he's been on, because every single one of them is just amazing. So you've done a great job on, coming on and offering value to people. And that's one thing I know that people listen. I can see which podcast people are listening to, and you get a lot of hits, my man. So
that's
it's a beautiful
great. Well,
thing.
You keep inviting me back. I've been on your show 17 times, and now you have me as a standing guest for this show, and I'm honored to be here, my friend.
Well, it's because you provide so much value, and you have so much. The biggest thing that you do is you organize things in such a way that it's easy to It's easy to understand. It's bite sizable. But the biggest thing about this, I think, to kind of sum it up, there's a few things that I want to kind of bring to the table. Number one, you've laid out like dozens and dozens and dozens of questions and scenarios that it seems complex, but I think the key thing that you have to do is understand. It's like, as musicians, we understand different chords. We understand major chords, minor chords, diminished,
chords,
augmented, diminished chords, sevenths, all that kind of stuff.
11s,
Right.
13s.
Right. It's not about knowing every single chord and using them all at the same time. It's about knowing, if you put in a minor and then put in a major, what does that feel? If you put in a diminished, if you put in a regular chord and a suspended seventh, how does that make people feel? So I think one of the things that you have to be aware of, what chords are available, but how you sequence them based on the song or the thing that you're trying to emote makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And chord changes are all about emotion.
Right, exactly. So if you start with a minor chord and go to a major chord, it's a minor, major, minor, major, and it's like a minor chord has a kind of sad feeling. A major chord has an uplifting feeling. So it's bad to good, bad to good. And you talked about, when you were talking about the what did you like, what didn't you like? If you could have anything, what would it be, and what would you want to avoid? I mean, those are questions that you could easily ask and let them maybe tell you one or two things. If they keep, if you have the time to go through and build that list, great. But if not, it's always a good idea to ask it anyways. It's like, well, what'd you like about the last time you purchased this? And, I ran into the same scenario with some of my customers. What did you like? Well, it was easy. We really didn't have to do anything. Okay, cool. What didn't you like? It wasn't getting the results. Okay, if you could have anything, what would it be? That we could find the right customers and spend less money. Okay, if you could avoid anything, it's like spending a bunch of money and not being able to measure what's going on. So if you can get a sense of what they're looking for, you can build the service around what they're asking for, and say, now you can come back and say, okay, look, here's what we want to do, and here's how I think we should execute it. Does this make sense to you? And here's one of the added benefits to this is, you're going to be able to create, you're not just going to throw away what you're doing, you're going to be able to create assets that you can use over and over and over again. So I think the key thing,
that's positioning. There was positioning. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think one of the key things is that with this, you need to understand that business selling is complex. Every situation is different. We're always trying to get to that positive. I mean, nothing happens for the client, nothing happens for us unless we close a deal. Otherwise it's just, an exercise and getting together and having lunch, right? I mean, it's really what it boils down to. So I think that the biggest takeaway from today is, you have to be patient in the process. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You have to be patient, and it's not about your agenda, it's about their agenda. And so your agenda becomes aligning with those people whose agenda matches your agenda.
Right.
You have really no control over their purchase priority. You don't have any control over their objectives. We attempt to control their priority by offering a discount if we have a scarcity deadline. But other than that, what we can control is their criteria. We can educate them on things they didn't know.
Right.
That helps them make a better decision. And so our job is really to help inform their criteria so they make an informed consent in their purchase.
And in the marketing side of things, I mean, that's one of the most important things is people will come on and try to create these benefit sheets, these feature sheets, and those kind of things. But really, you have to create the with them, which is what's in it for me, sense of here's how you will come out of this better. Yeah. You're going to have to buy it anyways. You're going to have to do it anyways, but here's what's in it for you. And I think keeping that personal connection going is really kind of one of the key points. Would you agree?
It is. Absolutely true. And the what's in it for them has to include what's in it for their scorekeeper.
Exactly. Yes. And that's huge. Yeah. Yeah. Because the bottom line is they got to answer to somebody. It's like, and I say in my book, Toilet Paper Math, if I buy the wrong toilet paper at home, I've got to answer my wife. I may sleep on the couch. If I buy the wrong toilet paper at business, I may sleep on the street because they're going to fire me because I've just bought, 5,000 rolls of toilet paper they cannot return, and everybody thinks it's sandpaper.
Prison grade.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you always have a scorekeeper, no matter who it is, even if it's you or God, there's always the scorekeeper.
There's
Got to answer to somebody. Right.
Yep. That's
all right,
exactly.
Mark. Well, this has been a blast. If people want to
is.
find you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, always the best way to get is let's connect on LinkedIn, because that way, if I change where I am, you can always find me, and if you change where you are, I can always find you. Best way to get there is to go to marksonlinkedin.com. So HTTP, no S, because it's just a redirect link. So HTTP marks MARKS on LinkedIn.com takes you directly to my profile, and there. Let's connect. Just say that you saw me on Bacon and Coffee, and I'll be delighted to give you 20 minutes of my time to have a conversation about anything you want. Want to talk about augmented chords? Okay.
Yeah, it'd be fun. They drive me crazy. Diminished chords are the easiest ones because there's just one, but that's a whole nother story. But not to diminish your time. Thank you, sir, so much for coming on. This was great.
Always
as usual. Always fun. Always learn something. I always do. People, go check out Mark S.A. Smith on the Bacon Podcast. Go to Bacon and Coffee. Actually, you go to liforsales.com. Look for the LinkedIn Lives. You can see all the repeats there. There's a ton of great information. Mark, I appreciate you, your time, and everything you've done. And with that being said, my friend, you enjoy Las Vegas, and I'm going to kind of kick us out with our Bacon and Coffee theme, man. So have a good one, buddy. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.